Good morning, sports fans. Yes, an episode in the morning for Sports for All. Today, this morning, we have with us Rio Shinkawa, who's the marketing manager of the Washington Wizards. So, for those who have basketball related questions, unfortunately, well, Rio won't be able to answer that. That's that's for the basketball people at the Wizards organization to answer. But we still have a lot of questions to ask for Rio since he's in Tokyo for the Olympics. He's in
Yeah.
Japan for the Olympics, and he's a national from the host country, and also a lot of Olympic related questions for Rio. So Rio, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. And with us also is Brian, the Godfather Yalong. Brian,
Yeah. Good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate for having me. Thank you for having me.
you're welcome, Rio. Okay, let's get to it. First question is how are things in Japan, and how was the Olympics last night? Were you at the venue? No fans, and was it eerily quiet? How was the opening ceremonies last night?
I actually just stayed at home and watched it on TV like, everybody around the world. But I think, there was unfortunately, a lot of negativity and, a lot of problems going into the Olympics. But I think, yesterday's opening ceremony, everybody kind of, I wouldn't say they forgot everything, but I think it kind of just was a start of something, positive to look forward to. And I think, the games have already started before that, but today I think it's going in full mode, and I think everybody's, started to get excited about the games, and now we could really focus on what all the special athletes, all the special talents that they provide and show to us. So I think it's going to be exciting.
Do you sense some pride, and are you proud of your country for pushing through with the Olympics and the Paralympics despite all the criticisms, despite all all the outside noise saying no, it should be canceled? How proud are you, and how much pride do you have in you that your country kept the faith and stood by its principles to keep the games despite the criticisms?
I'm personally not really, involved too much with the games, but working in sports, I know how difficult it is to organize an international event such as the Olympics, probably the world biggest platform. And I think despite all the negativity and the problems and being delayed for 1 year, and it's nothing against the athletes too, and for what we want to see is the great performance by the athletes, what they provide, and the super talents that they show. So I think it's despite all the problems, I think being able to hold the opening ceremony yesterday, and now we go forward with all this activities going on, and I'm sure there's going to be the bumps on the road, and I'm sure there may be problems arise as we go on, but hopefully it all at the end we could just look back and say, hey, we completed this, and hopefully it's all safe and good. But so that's all what we all wish for right now.
Well, you've been around athletes, professional athletes, for a long time with the Wizards organization, and now in the Olympics. Were there times that you can imagine how mentally challenging it is to be an athlete right now? You're competing for your country. At the same time, you also have to worry about your health because this thing floats in the air, and you breathe the same air as someone who, God forbid, may be infected. You can get infected yourself, and after training so many years, you may be asked to go home. So what are your thoughts on that?
Even us individuals, probably yourself, myself, we all try to take the best precautions as possible, because we just don't know much about this virus and what kind of effect, and you never know, you may be infected. So I think even us individuals, not athletes, has that mindset. So I think the athletes that are involved, I think they had that mindset for, you know, as long as the virus has existed. And I think to have that mentality to prepare, and now they're at the games, and now the games have started, they still have to continue that precaution. And I think that's just tough mentality, just even thinking about that. And you know and that goes for all the players and athletes and staff that came from all around the world. They had to travel, but there's things that you just can't control, getting on a flight, and transportation and all that. And I just think that's just a tough mentality. And hopefully now, they could really, really focus on the games itself and their competitors. And, you know, and it just results in a sign of relief when it's all said and done. But I'm sure it's all tough on everybody, but, we just want to see them have fun and, enjoy the moment, hopefully.
And so I think that's the mindset, is just go out there and have fun while competing hard for your country, and the rest will take care of itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's opening ceremony, the greatest part about it was the athletes, more walking in the stadium, and all the smiles they had and all the emotions they had. And it's, you know, we see so much negativity in the media and surroundings, but you see the athletes smiling and, having fun, and that, they're here. It's kind of a great scene to see.
And let's go to I hope I pronounce his name right, Rui Hachimura.
Yep.
What How was he mentally going to the Olympics, being the flag bearer? What did it mean to him to carry his country's flag?
I mean, he's been mentioning that it's an honor for him, and for him and for basketball as a sport too. For a basketball player to be named the flag bearer of Japan, I think it means a lot for the sport and the momentum it has. And I think that just kind of shows what how he has born to become a star. And I think it was a great scene for him and the sport of basketball itself yesterday at the opening ceremony.
Now with Rui and Utah playing for the Raptors, do you sometimes think that if the sport, if the popularity or the sport of basketball doesn't pick up in Japan, I don't know what will. Do you have that mentality, that thinking, with two of your countrymen already in the NBA?
I mean, hopefully, there's more to come. This is not the end of it. I mean, a lot of people or the media would say this is the golden team or the dream team of Japan. But I actually don't want to use that phrase, because I'm just hoping there's more to come, even in our lifetime, and, after our lifetime, there's more of a real dream team of Japan that comes. But definitely in the history of basketball in Japan so far, having two current active NBA players on the roster, and we're playing in the Olympics. So I think it's really exciting, and it's an opportunity for basketball to kind of gain that momentum and gain more popularity, just because it's becoming more visible. And the the 3 games will be shown on terrestrial TV. And right now you don't see much basketball too much on live on terrestrial TV all the time. So the couple games leading up to the Olympics was shown on terrestrial TV too, and now we got the Olympics going. So I think just that whole package of this couple months with Rui and Utah being on the roster as well, it's an opportunity for people to see what basketball is about too.
Yeah, and having those two guys on your team will give my national team headaches, and our coaching staff. So
I mean, Japan didn't start it this way too. I mean, all the competition in Asia, brought to the level of where they are now. So I think it's not about just Japan. I think hopefully it's about Asia and kind of the strength of basketball, the popularity of basketball in Asia continues to grow, and kind of same thing in soccer slash football. I think when you look at the world, I mean, Asia wasn't really a powerhouse, but now you see, I guess Japan, South Korea, now Australia, and there's Iran. All the teams kind of competed, and they all raised their level, and now, they could be a dark horse in like World Cups and Olympic Games. So I think hopefully that kind of relates to basketball for the future as well.
All right, Godfather, your turn.
Okay, Ryo, I'm just curious. I mean, you're handling the marketing for the Washington Wizards, right?
Yep.
Because I'm trying to do the same thing a bit for some of the teams here, although it's not just limited to basketball. How hard
Okay.
is it? What do you resort to? I mean, how hard is it for you? What I just like to get your thoughts on that.
Okay. I mean, just kind of going on the history, how the Washington Wizards kind of started this. Uh, I wouldn't say project, but this strategy was, when Rui Hachimura was drafted, they saw how much excitement there was toward Japan, and many Japanese media came to Washington D.C. for the press conference the first day that Rui arrived in Washington, and our business personnel felt that there's an opportunity there and responsibility as well to kind of show what he is doing in Washington D.C. and what kind of player he is becoming, and that's how we started a Japanese social media account, a Twitter account, and hired two production person. I wasn't actually the first one hired. There was two other individual hired in the production department. So we started to film, Rui's daily activities on the court, on practice, in the locker room, and then we started to subtitle everything. The coach speaks before and after games, so we subtitled everything in Japanese, provided translation. So for the Wizards to become closer to the people in Japan, because not everybody in Japan could just hop on a flight and go to Washington D.C. and watch the game. So I think that's always going to be the toughest part: the distance, the time difference. But I think that's why there's opportunities on the digital world that to kind of tighten in that gap and become closer to the fans, being able to show content and subtitle everything, and we have and not it and and for the future, not just become a team about Rui, but with the other players as well, and people kind of following along, our coach, our trades, our free agent acquisition. I think if the whole interest becomes part of the basketball fans in Japan, it wouldn't just be about Rui, it would be about the Washington Wizards. And I think we're kind of going into year three. I think that's kind of increasing, and we just had a new hiring of a head coach, and the interest level was high. I think people was curious who the new head coach would be, and obviously the interest is who's going to become the coach that's going to for Rui. But I think they kind of watched us for the first 2 years and saw what kind of a team the Wizards are, and they all kind of had their opinions and thoughts, like what kind of coach would fit the Wizards right now. And I think that's kind of the, I wouldn't say education level, but I think that having that conversation grow within our fans, it's huge, I think, and that kind of increases kind of the Wizards brand on the digital world as well.
Okay, so yeah, I want to know. I'm sure you had these you had to face some negativity. I mean,
Mhm.
in sports, it's normal. How do you deal with that in marketing? I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people doing that here in the Philippines want to know how do the Wizards deal with that.
Um, I mean, to be honest, there haven't been like too much negativity like coming toward
or
us. I mean,
or controversies, something like that. I mean, for the team as a whole. I mean, you have to handle that, right?
yeah, I mean, especially in the digital world, there's always opinions,
Yeah.
all sorts of opinions there. But I think just our Japanese account's obviously going to be a second language account, and our main channel is always going to be the English channel.
Yes.
So I mean, as an organization, we kind of follow the guideline, and I don't know how much you followed in the NBA, but there was issues like last year, obviously fighting with COVID, and
Mm,
NBA took a strong effort in Black Lives Matter, and I think those issues could always become something that everybody's going to have an opinion on.
yeah.
But I think for us, we just try to align with the organizational kind of the mindset, and also kind of become an educational. It may not be anything related to basketball, but we wanted to show what our players are fighting against, what players' philosophy is outside of the court too, and what they value, and and that was kind of a huge movement within the country in the United States. So we kind of wanted to show that and express that to our Japanese fan as well. Why are they wearing this kind of T-shirt before games? Like,
Yeah.
I think we had the responsibility of teaching that. So I think, for the negativity part, I mean, there's always going to be opinions, but we just want to stay positive and, do what's right, and, kind of, and hopefully that will kind of take care of it itself, I think.
All right. Thank you, Vince. Back to you.
Rio, is there a big Japanese community in the DC area?
Uh, uh, DC is really a global community. Obviously, the capital of the United States, so there's a lot of embassies from, all around the world. But so there's somewhat a big population of Japanese as well. Obviously, not compared to like New York or LA, but I think just kind of being in that East Coast, closer to New York as well. I think there is, and there's a lot of good universities in Washington D.C. area. So I think there's a lot of researchers and professors as well. Uh, and obviously the governmental side, I think there's somewhat of a Japanese population there.
And I read an article, Rio, unfortunately, about Rui saying that he gets daily a dose of hate messages and racist messages. I read in an article. How have you personally, as his countryman and the organization, have advised him and guided him uh, to weather those all those hate messages?
I mean, I think, just as an organization, we just, continue to value the diversity, and emphasize like our global. I think, Washington Wizards is part of a, company called Monumental Sports Entertainment, and we emphasize, global, and obviously we have partners all over the world. And I think Washington Wizards had one of the most international players on the roster last year. So I think it's just not specifically giving direction to one individual or anything, but I think just as an organization to emphasize the differences in the diversity. And I think that kind of relates well to the city of Washington D.C. as well, because it's such a global city. So I think just kind of trying to connect the two, and I think we continue to keep on sending those messages.
What are the challenges, Rio, of your job as marketing a professional sports team?
I mean, I think being in Japan or trying to gain more fans in Japan, it's always difficult that players aren't in Japan. So sometimes it's harder for people in Japan to relate to, but hopefully, the COVID situation gets better, and it's easier for people to travel, and hopefully the Wizards could play a game in Japan in the future, as most recent in 2019, the Houston Rockets and Toronto Raptors played in Japan for exhibition games. So, hopefully those kind of international games increases as we go along with obviously the situation getting better.
Is part of your job, Rio, because there are players who have projects or work for the DC community. Is that part of the marketing of the team? The work that the players do off the court, is that part and parcel of the overall marketing of the Washington Wizards?
I think obviously we have a department that emphasizing community outreach, but I think I don't know if it's just the Wizards, but there's a lot of players that's really focused on doing what's good for the community, and it's sometimes from the players. I think the players are really interested in doing something to help the community and use the team as a resource sometimes. I think so. I think it kind of goes both ways, and I think NBA as a league really emphasized that as well. So
Are there any parallels, Rio, between when Yao Ming came into the NBA and had the expectations of billions of people, and Rui's situation coming in from an American university in Gonzaga and having the expectations also of a whole country on his shoulders?
yeah, I think they get compared a lot, and there's similarities and there's differences. Obviously, Rui played in Gonzaga, and he was probably well known about among the base basketball community in the United States already. Participating in March Madness and the NCAA. So there's a little differences, but obviously having the as you say, the whole country on its back. I think there's somewhat of a similarity, but you know, and in Japan there was a player named Yuta Tabuse that
Yes,
kind of was
playing
played
for
it.
Phoenix.
Yep. So and now we have Utah as well. So I think obviously Rui being drafted so high in the first round is probably has everybody in Japan, kind of excited for him too. But I think now as a group and now obviously using, Japanese basketball with the Olympics, I think just kind of that whole momentum, hopefully he doesn't have to, take all the burden on his back, but just, I think him, doing well with the Wizards and the NBA, I think it's going to raise the momentum even more.
Rio, from a marketing standpoint, because we've been hearing a lot of rumors, Russell Westbrook, and from a marketing perspective, from a marketing lens, how do you spin that, or how do you continue marketing the team despite all these rumors about trades and hirings and firings and all that?
I mean, I just control what I can control, and that's just uncontrollable on my end. I'm not on the basketball operations side, and I'm more on the business operations side in my gig right now. So, you know, there's nothing you can control. And just regarding the rumors and all the stories that we read online, I mean, from that perspective, I'm probably a fan just like everybody else. So I'm, just taking it all for granted. But, this may happen, this might happen. You kind of think about all the scenarios, but, there's so much you can do. So when it actually happens, I think you just have to plan out how to execute it. And I think that's what it was like last year when Russell Westbrook got traded to the Wizards. It wasn't like we knew him far in advance. It was like, I think, really up to the minute. And once we knew, we were like, we try to plan out a strategy. How do we, kind of show his journey to Washington, D.C. And obviously that trade was, we traded John Wall, who was a longtime Washington Wizard. So there was, emotions within our fans too. So I think we kind of had to show both stories. And I think just as a whole, marketing, digital team, and everybody kind of huddle up and get together, and we just plan out a whole strategy. And I think we did a good job there. So I think that's kind of the step we take when something else happens in the off season. And you know I think you just always got to be prepared because you never know what's going to happen at what time. And I used to actually be an interpreter in baseball, kind of how I started my career. So I was with the players 24/7 usually, and kind of more on the players side. And, you know, when trade deadline came in Major League Baseball, you never knew what's going to happen at that time. And I was with the players. So, you know, I wasn't thinking about strategy or planning out what we should do from a marketing perspective, but I was with the players. So I was like, well, what happens if we get traded? We have to pack our bags, get a new apartment in the new city, or, I was kind of probably thinking like a player. So from that experience, I think it really helps that, you just have a mindset. You never know what's going to happen, but just be ready and, control what you can control.
I'm sure, Rio, you've watched your share of live Wizards games. Any memory from your watching of the games that stands out? Um, any any good memories, uh, players or coaches, when watching the live games?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think I just now that I'm in charge of a lot of the digital content, I think I just have that perspective in me even more. I mean, I used to watch a lot of the what's going on the court, obviously, but like, is there a storyline on the bench with the players or interaction with the fans? And I think I try to view that even more now, and have always have my phone ready. If I see something that's gonna be good content, then I have to shoot my phone and take a video. So I think I'm not sure if there's any one specific like moment of the game, but I think more like we see our players give their shoes to the fans right after the game. Sometime Russell Westbrook does this
Yeah, he
probably
does that
every
a lot. Yeah.
game, and you kind of see that, and that's like I think that's just a great story to show our fans, and not just the emotion on the court, but off the court. He may have missed the last shot of the game, and we may have lost. And everybody sees the emotion on the court, and how mad he may be, how sad he may be, and the broadcast might end right there. The TV broadcast, but there's always a story right after that. What kind of emotion does he see show with his teammate, with his coaches in the locker room, or what kind of greeting does he do to the fans? And he may lost a game, but the next moment he's taking off his shoes and giving it to his fans. And you know before the digital world, we would have never been able to see that unless you were on site. But now with the you know with the social media, we could show that storyline. So I think that's just being able to see that on site, it's kind of special. And being part of the team, I would like to show, capture those moments and show that as much as possible.
Rio, in last this past season's playoffs, unfortunately, we saw some stories of fan misbehavior,
Mhm.
and part of, please correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the experience of Wizards game is your experience as a fan, your experience as a fan in a Wizards game. So, what were your thoughts on the misbehavior of these fans in those playoff games? And from a marketing lens, how do you work around that if God forbid it happens in a Wizards game?
I mean, it's just unfortunate. I mean, I've been to many sporting events as a fan, not working, and you appreciate the players and the performance they show on the court. And I know it's becoming entertainment. There's media, there's social media. Everybody can be a media with their phones now, but there's a line that you shouldn't cross. And I think you just always have to have that respect. And it's unfortunate that they feel they could, kind of tolerate that when the players are, they have nothing to guard, and they can't, and the people that attack them with whatever they have is they know that they're not going to fight back. So it's not a level field there, and I think it's just unfortunate that those things happen. And I think as an organization, as and the league, I think NBA does a really good job on acting right after, but just have to emphasize that those actions shouldn't be tolerated. And just as a fan, I just hope that the respect always comes first to the to the players.
A last question before I turn you over to Brian. Is there a conscious effort? I'm sure there's an effort by the Wizards organization to educate the fans on behaving in games and continue a family atmosphere where opposing players are not harassed or verbally abused.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's just like a atmosphere that we just as an organization needs to create, and I think that this goes along with any department or anything we do. I think obviously with the social media perspective of it, we just kind of try to show that, and kind of continue to build that family atmosphere within. And I think that's kind of like how we create hashtags. We have a DC above all hashtag right now with that we use with the Wizards, but I think that's just kind of emphasizing more of the community and the family. And we often use the word DC family, and I think just kind of creating the atmosphere. And you would never think of attacking your family on any circumstances. So I think that's just that atmosphere that we, not only us, but I think all sports team tries to create. So if somebody does attack, everybody's trying to protect you.
All right, Brian.
Okay, I've been going through Rayos and to their account and the things that you've been doing online. I'm just curious. Do you go for those exclusive interviews with the Wizard Space, or are you allowed to do that?
Right now, you mean?
Yeah.
uh I mean, this past season, uh there was a lot of restriction, obviously. So we did a lot of stuff online. And regarding like our Japanese efforts, we have two more individuals in the production department. So I'm usually kind of the one uh, kind of helping out, planning everything and strategizing it. But the work is done by the two other guys named
Oh.
Zaki Kuma and Daya Onoguchi. And Zaki Kuma is more of the kind of the interviewer. He goes into the press conferences. He does the one-on-one interview with the players. So we kind of plan out who's good guy to interview, what topic should we interview and stuff like that. But he's the one actually doing the work, so I can't really speak too much of it and uh, take the credit for it. But a lot of the stuff was done online this year,
Mm-hmm.
just like this, just like the Zoom calls. So hopefully that changes, continue, situation gets better, and hopefully we have a normal season
Mm-hmm.
going into next year and beyond.
Right. And then I saw on, from NBA.com, you connected basketball. You didn't just call this stick with the NBA. You also connected with the other Japanese athletes.
Hmm.
Like, okay, can you run us through that? How did this come about? I mean, you had players like Shohei Otani
Hmm.
and Naomi. What's this?
Osaka.
Osaka. Yeah. I'm very curious how you were able to interconnect them with what you're doing right now.
I think those were kind of opportunities that came about because they came to our games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was just opportunity for Rui to meet with Shohei Otani or Naomi Osaka. And but I think just kind of our perspective as you know for the Japanese marketing side, I think you just want to create fans and storylines and any way possible. And I think a lot of basketball fans are interested in what we do or what Rui's doing, but maybe tennis fans don't care, or baseball fans don't care. But if those two players connect, the group gets bigger that might be interested in basketball, or Rui Hachimura or the Washington Wizards. And I think that's what we continue to do. And for me, that's especially being in Japan right now, I try to connect more with like the domestic professional league and B league. Kind of did something like connect with the mascots. Like we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a mascot, G-Wiz, and there was a famous mascot with one of the teams in B League. So they did like an online like a dance off, or
Mhm. Yeah.
and I think just kind of doing something like that. It's just the fans of the B League me be like, oh, what's this mascot? Oh, it's a mascot from the Washington Wizards. Oh, Rui Hachimura plays there. Just kind of getting that pie bigger and bigger. I think that's our goal. And
Mhm.
like this past year, I went to Toyama, which is Rui Hachimura's hometown,
Mhm.
and I went there probably 3 times in the last 6 months and try to connect with people from his hometown. And I actually had the opportunity to meet with the mayor, the past mayor there, and present a Washington Wizards jersey, and now that's showcased within City Hall right now. So I think kind of those stuff, and all the citizens just walking by City Hall, they see the jersey and they're like, oh, our player from our hometown is playing in the NBA. Maybe that's their first, connection with us. And I think just finding any way that we could increase that, I think it's what I'm trying to do right now.
So, I mean, you're in Japan right now. Do you see anybody? And you mentioned the Japanese B League, which is very popular here because some of
Mhm.
the our players
Yeah.
are getting over there. And
Yeah.
just earlier, another player was there. Do you see anybody close to following Rui's footsteps in the NBA? I mean, there locally.
I think there's quite a few. When we went to Toyama and we actually interviewed fans there, and they were really telling us about how proud they were of Rui being with in the NBA. So I think, especially right now in the Japanese basketball community, I think a lot of people follows us and follows Rui, and obviously he's on probably every game that he plays in is featured on TV, on sports news. And now he has a lot of personal endorsement as well, so his face is visible when you walk in Tokyo. Or right now he's on a, I don't know if you saw it, but he's on a cover of a ramen noodle
Oh.
because he has a endorsement with Nissin
Mhm.
uh, that makes the cup noodles. So he's on the cover of cup noodles now. So you walk into a
Wow.
convenience store or a supermarket and you see his face on there. So it's hard to ignore his presence right
Yes.
now, I think. And I think the local interest toward Rui is increasing, and especially yesterday being the flag bearer of the whole country in the Olympics, I think added another layer to that. So we just continue to try to welcome in the new fans as well, and continue to build our relationship with our existing fans.
Well, all I know is that your noodles and your ramen there are very good. When I was there, it's the best I've tried. Anyway, Vince, back to you.
As marketing manager, Rio, what are your excuse me, what are your deal breakers and non-negotiables when dealing with entities or companies who want to partner with the Wizards, with the team? What are your, do you have standards? Do you have a list? What are your non-negotiables and deal breakers? Because you have a sponsor logo on the Wizards uniform. What standards do you follow?
I mean, I'm actually not that decision maker. I mean, obviously there's people within our organization make those kind of decisions. So I'm really not the one making the
You're not
deals,
privy. Yeah.
but obviously there's the, there's categories in the NBA and within, the organization on how many sponsors you can have with different categories. So I think you always have to follow that. But I think, right now the Washington Wizards has a partnership with NEC, a Japanese company. So, that's one. But I think we continue to try to expand that. And, you know, I think that's another way of growing your brand. I wouldn't say there's limitations on what you can just do individually, but it always helps having a partner and, trying to create something more or bigger with a company or a company that has a global mindset. And I think, that's what you always, try to value, I think, in developing that. And I think, the Wizards continue to do that with other, brands globally as well. So.
When you were an interpreter with the baseball team, was did you experience any culture shock if that was the first time you were around professional athletes? You're in the locker room, perhaps you were hearing locker room talk? Was there any culture shock on your part?
Um, I mean, there's, I don't know where to begin, but I mean, it's a really interesting, I don't know, like a world, I guess, being 24/7, it's, as we talked about, it's a family, you travel with the team in baseball, you start spring training in February. And if you're lucky enough, you continue to be there until, November. And it's, it's always said a lot, but you spend time with the players and the people on the team more than your family. And that's a reality, and in baseball, especially because you have what, you know, the number of games you have in that, in that time. And you're traveling every other 3 days at mostly to different parts of the country. So, so I think, I don't know if I would use the word culture shock, but it was a really interesting experience that I was able to have for the 5 years I was an interpreter in Major League Baseball. And I think that experience allowed me to kind of gain a different perspective than, just working, you know, in business or in marketing for the entire time since, after graduating college. If I was that, then I may never have the perspective of what is it like for a player, to prepare or to play in games day-to-day lives. So I think having that perspective is a strength of mine just because of that experience, I think.
And you spent 5 years in baseball. And I'm sorry, how many years have you been with the Wizards?
It's actually only been a year and a half. So, you know, I've been actually started in baseball as like a PR intern slash interpreter. So I did that for 7 seasons. And then I was working kind of like a freelancer in Japan, doing all sorts of things. So, I was involved with baseball then too, but with basketball, like NBA Japan games came. So I did like an interpreting gig there. So I think that 5 years in freelance was really helpful too, because I was able to experience all sorts of roles in different sports and kind of see, how how sports in Japan is kind of organized. Because if I didn't have that experience, I think I would have always been like, this is how it's done in the United States, and I would never have that perspective of how it's done in Japan, which I need to have if I'm working with partners in Japan. So I think kind of having that balance is always important and valuable too.
In all the years in professional sports, were you able to establish friendships and relationships with former Wizards players or former players that you were with in Major League Baseball that you're still in contact with?
Yeah, I'm still in contact with some, but it's always hard when you're an interpreter to because you always have to have that business relationship, and it's not always a friend buddy relationship. So it's always you always kind of hesitate what kind of relationship you build after you're done with that work relationship. But one of the players that I worked with in Major League Baseball retired last year in Japan, so I kind of went to his retirement game and kind of saw that. And it's kind of yeah, I think one of the players I worked with in previously is going to retire this year too. So you kind of always have that kind of emotion always coming back, and you're remembering that. But hopefully, when the player retires, you could just kind of sit down and have a meal with them and just kind of remember the old days. But I try to not to interact too much while they're still playing, because I don't want when I meet them, the conversation will just be about what happened in the US, and that may always not be a positive. So I just try to stay away from that as much as possible while they're actually, actively playing. And hopefully when it's all said and done, when the player's retired, he has no more pressure, then, we could kind of sit back and just have a beer or two and have a good story to talk.
And I'm sure you've dealt with media in your line of work, and you know, you've been around professional athletes. Does media sometimes put professional athletes, in a high pedestal that fans like you and me don't think they're vulnerable, or they're not no feelings, or for example they don't have any mental health issues, or if they do it would be a taboo to talk about them? You think media does that too much, or does it a lot?
I know, we both have a job to do, so I'm not going to criticize everything that's going on. But, obviously, sometimes especially being an interpreter, there's sometimes the unfair part of athletes that their word may be cut off at a certain point, or the context, or maybe different, or, especially right now, your word could be translated, or, could taken in a million different ways. And especially with social media and Twitter, you have a word limit. So there's how much you could really explain in one tweet. So I think sometimes those results and a kind of an unfair situation for the players, and you know how to solve that. It's anyone's guess right now, but you know, but I think, as you said, sometimes the player, isn't really seen as they're not vulnerable, and you know, and a regular fan, when they don't know, they could be like, "Hey, you're earning $100 million. Why do you say that?" or something like that. But when you're with the player 24/7, it's you never really think about that, and so I think there's always both sides to it. But as you said, there's always unfair side for maybe not just the players, maybe for obviously for the media as well. They want to cover the whole story, but they just don't have access, or the player has so much time in their life that they could afford, so you can't write the whole story. And I think it just goes both ways, but hopefully that relationship continues to get better.
Earlier, Rio, I asked you about the challenges of your job. Now, what are the perks of your work? What's the best thing you like about your job?
I mean, just being in sports, I said the difficult part is the things you can't control, but I think that's the exciting part of it. You never know what's going to happen. And obviously, that may be a negative, but I kind of look at, is it a positive, exciting? You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. There may be a trade going on right this moment. You never know. And I think that's just the exciting part of being in sports. And, every day is different. I think I enjoy that.
All right, Godfather.
Don't get used to that, Rayo. Anyway, okay, I couldn't help but notice you said that you were an interpreter, and just earlier this month there was this issue with an ES. I'm not gonna say thing. ESPN
Mm.
analyst and Ochani. Would you care to chime in on that? I mean, did this was this a? I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but maybe if you could chime in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I know he clarified it after his quote that he mentioned on air. So, and after reading that, clarification, it's I think it cleared you know what he was really trying to say, and just as an interpreter myself, I think it's not a disadvantage for the players, but
Mhm.
I think you always want to emphasize player connection,
Yeah.
as an individual one on one, because we're all human beings, and I think just having that direct relationship with somebody as a human being, I think it always helps, right? I mean, even if you don't speak the same language, with gestures, with just broken English, I think you want to approach it that way. If I go to a country that I have no clue what I'm speaking, but I want to connect with the individual, you try to show that with expression or with gestures or whatever you can. So I think as being an interpreter, I always try to emphasize that. I mean, my goal as an interpreter always was for down the road the player to be like, oh, I don't need an interpreter anymore, to build that confidence in him, or for the player to be able to connect with other players and coaches. But, just the logistics of it, especially in baseball, these guys are, professionals, and they're established guys that plays mostly into their 30s, and they have the opportunity to go to the major leagues, and they concentrated on being the best that they can for 30 years or however years they played, and now they go get the opportunity to go to the United States, but there's a strong huge investment from the major league organization to these players, and for the players to provide that same uh, you know product or same talent that they provide in Japan in the United States. I think it just happens that they can't, if they can't speak the language, then it's better for all involved to have an interpreter there, and and obviously we can't control anything that goes on the field, so
Yeah.
so we just try to support the best we can off the field, and you know I'm sure there's opinions from everybody regarding that, but I think we all experience, if you go to a different country and you don't know what what others are speaking, it's hard to perform,
Yeah.
for a media individual. If they go to a different country and they have to interview a player, I'm sure it's easier to write an article if you have an interpreter. And I think if we all had that experience of, having a global or a culture shock experience ourselves, I think it's easier to relate. So.
Actually, when I went there, I had that problem. Not everybody is that fluent with English.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So my other question was, okay, I'm gonna pick up a line from one of our our previous guests, Vince. It was Dan Barto. He mentioned that it's going to be a crazy off season.
Mm.
There will be demanded trades, players asking for whatever the things they expect in this NBA off season. Is this something that you will be monitoring as well?
Monitoring
And
the
in the
yeah.
marketing side, yeah, from the marketing aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have several free agent players in the off season as well. So you always have to you know follow. I'm probably constantly on Twitter and refreshing, and seeing what's gonna happen. And as I said, you just always have to be prepared and act, and kind of make the best out of what happens. So there's always that excitement. And when it actually happens, you're like in constant, thinking mode, like, oh, what to do next, what to do next. So I think it's always good to be prepared, and, always, I would obviously, be checking it every day, what's going to happen in the off season.
Yeah, because the Wizards have two players in the hot seat, and I'm sure it's gonna be busy for you.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. And, obviously we have a new head coach. So,
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, so
so
all eyes.
we'll,
Yeah.
we'll see. we'll see.
All right, Vince.
Really, we're seeing the, or we're beginning to see the globalization of Japanese athletes. You know, starting with Naomi, Shohei Otani, Rui, Yuta, and also Inui of boxing. You, well, obviously you know Rui personally, and maybe Shohei and Naomi. Have these young men and women been able to sort of keep their Japanese values, their roots, despite being globalized and spending a lot of time in the US?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, especially yesterday's opening ceremony kind of showed that, Otani, Rui being the flag bearer and Naomi uh, putting the torch. I think, that's the direction I think Japan's moving into, kind of that, diversity and, globalization within sports as well. And I think, but the values in Japan's, I think, never going to get lost in the picture. I think, there's always going to be sports in Japan, and I think the discipline that the culture values, I think, has been in the roots of a lot of these individuals. And but I think, the next step for Japan is to be able to build that global product within. I think a lot of the players that are having success right now globally, I think they left Japan at an earlier stage, or they were able to flourish outside of Japan. Obviously, like Rui and Utah, they played in Japan till high school, so I think their roots and how they started the sport is within Japan. But you know, if somebody asked me, would they be in the same spot if they went to the college in Japan? I don't really have an answer for that. And, is it because they went to, university in the US and, played in the in NCAA March Madness? Is that the reason? That's a if. So we really can't answer that, but that's the reality of it. And I think same goes along with like Naomi Osaka and, Kei Nishikori for tennis, and players like Hideki Matsuyama's, playing in for golf is in, I think went to US as well. So I think, that's the next step. I think, there's a lot of good players being developed in Japan and, start the sports and grow. And if the league becomes a world standard, maybe a lot of the international talents would, decide to come to Japan, and there will be, more and more talents coming from Japan. So I think that's kind of the balance you always have to look at. And I think baseball's been kind of the, example that they were able to build, within Japan and develop a professional league, and players like Shohei Otani or, Yu Darvish or, Ichiro in the past, that they accomplished at the highest level in Japan, that they were able to go overseas, then, kind of maintain or become better in the United States. So, so I think, for the players that succeeded in worldwide, the Japanese athletes, they always have their roots in their roots within themselves, I think. Yeah.
All right. We have a few minutes left, Rio, and my final question to you, and it's a bit personal, so I would understand if you're hesitant or reluctant to answer. But you mentioned that you're a father of a newborn, and congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And
Congrats.
well, there's a pandemic going on, and aside from the joy of being the father of a newborn child, I myself am a father of a 10-month-old
Okay.
little girl, and she was born during the pandemic.
Mhm.
So, aside from the joy, is there at the back of your mind, is there an anxiety? You and your wife will have to raise this child in very uncertain times, in very abnormal circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I think even in any other time, you always have that anxiety and trying to grow a human being, I think. And I mean, it's our first child too, so we don't know what's the right or wrong answer to this. But as you said, it happens to be during a pandemic, and there's always got to be that limitations, and where you can go, how you can show your son where to go and everything. But I mean, he's 4 months right now, so hopefully when he becomes 1 year old, 2 year old, and it's a different world out there, and the pandemic is decreasing by then. But I think we're in the same shoes, right? I
Yes,
think
yes.
I think
I
there's
can
always,
relate.
yeah, I mean, there's always going to be the anxiety, and
Yeah.
trying to find the right answer, and you just try to get help from people who has that experience. And yeah, and hopefully he becomes a sports fan.
Well, on that note, Rio, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and thank you for your time. Thank you for joining the program. And arigato gozaimasu.
Arigato gozaimasu, and really appreciate you having me. And it was great to kind of reflect and talk about different cultures.
Yeah. Thanks,
And
Rio.
good luck. We only wish the best for Rui. Good luck in guiding him. We hope his star continues to rise in the league.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All
Yeah.
right, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I just like to thank. I could relate so much to Rio right now because we're practically doing the same thing. Although yours is much bigger, and
Mm.
I'd love to get. That's why I was asking those things before when we started. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna follow you and see what you're doing.
Thank you, appreciate it. Whenever you guys come to Japan, or to Washington D.C. for that standpoint, always reach out, or let's continue to connect.
Yep. First thing I'm gonna ask you when I go to Japan is the best ramen.
All right. Let's go.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. On that note, another episode of Sports for All ends. We thank Rio for his time. We wish you the best of luck as marketing manager of the Washington Wizards. So good morning, everyone, and so long.
Stay safe.
Right.